Hey YouTube, I'm in the hills high above Sussex, and behind me here is a copse where there used to be a Roman temple where they used to execute rebellious Britons back in the day. But anyway, I've had a comment on one of my videos telling me how witnesses are ever increasing, and it's such a silly thing to say. If numbers are the proving feature of true religion, isn't Mormonism more true than the truth, and Catholicism even more true and blessed than them all? According to the figures, there's about 1.2 billion Catholics, and Catholics say they're ever increasing as well. I guess at this point my commenter would say popularity is no longer an indication of correctness, and show himself to be selective, biased and inconsistent when evaluating evidence. Yet, the witness that left that comment is just whistling in the wind. His cult is dying, as are the other religions, and the governing body knows it. The fastest growing group on the spectrum of religious involvement is one I belong to, the non-religious. According to my commenter, that should ironically indicate God's blessing. But the reason for this growth is tied to the reasons all religions have failed historically, of which I'll address two in broad strokes. First, I'll look at superstition. Superstition has long been the subject of academic study, and there's strong arguments that allow religiosity to be included as a form or type of superstition. Of the various Western religious groups, witnesses are certainly among the worst sufferers of this affliction. Look at their attitude to Smurfs, Pokemon, second-hand goods, music, etc. If there's a life problem, it's caused by not reading the Watchtower enough, or because you've brought a demon-infested item into the home. They're told field service and prayer will stop an abusive partner. Clearly superstitious nonsense. Superstition itself has been found to be a result of feeling powerless in your life and caused by educational shortfalls. When you have few options or low chances of success in life, then superstition helps soothe stress and gives cause for optimism. In our field service car groups, we all know that going to prosperous areas is very rarely productive. Some of us would say they're already living in paradise. These people are already in control of their lives. They don't need superstition. Research shows in games of luck, players often have rituals. In games of pure skill, players tend not to. This brings me to one of the reasons this cult will fail soon, at least in prosperous Europe and later in America. In Europe, healthcare is free. Housing can be free, and our politicians interfere less in our personal lives, and because of this, the destiny of our lives is more in our own hands, and with that, the reason for superstition evaporates. It's no coincidence the more personally secure European has less interest in religion than our more insecure American cousins. It's no coincidence that the poorer and more disenfranchised you are, the more likely you are to have faith. This is why the governing body want us to keep knocking the same doors. It's because we may knock when the householder is at a low ebb and feeling out of control, maybe bereavement, divorce or job loss. We might knock when the householder's vulnerable to superstitious religiosity. Even the Bible writers knew when people would smell the bullshit. Isn't there something about non-believers appearing when people have peace and security? The Bible writers were clearly astute observers of people and knew of this little wrinkle in human nature. Secure, confident, educated people don't need faith. And this is why this cult so desperately wanted United Nations membership, so they could access and capitalise on the misery and hopelessness of war-torn areas, people perfectly prepared for superstitious nonsense. In fact, social science is able to predict areas of high religiosity merely by looking at postcode or zip data overlaid with income and education status. As people become more prosperous, the Jehovah's Witness cult will fade as their target demographic declines. Now, moving to the second reason religions fail. I'm not looking at oppression here, but simple education and knowledge. To support this, there's plenty of evidence. The Greeks thought Mount Olympus was the seat of the gods, and from where Zeus threw thunderbolts. The religious leaders or governing body of that time called the mountain sacred. They restricted access and killed anyone who wanted to climb the mountain and see for themselves. Non-believers were called atheists and executed for disobeying the will of Zeus, as published by the governing body. Until one day, a brave man climbed Olympus, and instantly that faith died, and that governing body found to be frauds. The Roman gods fell when Emperor Constantine converted and suppressed the old religion, but up to that point Christians too were called atheists because they refused to believe. They had insufficient reason to believe. A similar fate befell the Egyptians and even the Jews, when their faith was supplanted by Christians, and later Christianity itself found insufficient evidence to stop the start of Islam. I've said in an earlier video that the key defining property of truth is its singular nature, many ideas becoming one accepted truth, an example being the thousands of creation myths being whittled down to one accepted scientific theory, supported by evidence. Contrast this with the baseless myth being identifiable by its proliferation of confusing and often contradictory ideas, perfectly exemplified in religion, which leads us right to the internet and education. This cult initially tried to keep us away from the internet. They absolutely feared and hated it, in the same way the Greek governing body feared and hated the idea of anyone climbing Mount Olympus. Education and knowledge kills religious superstition dead, and this is why faith is dying now. Even the huge Catholic and Islamic monoliths and others acknowledge this. In 2008, Saudi King Abdullah gave a speech to 200 religious leaders in Madrid. The conference was attended by Jesse Jackson, the World Jewish Congress, the Catholic Church, etc. The focus was how could they use their combined power to combat the rise of atheism, and how could they sustain their faiths in the information age. It wouldn't shock me if the governing body was there too. But we know what the outcome of this conference was because we see the results. Cults such as Jehovah's Witnesses, Islam and Catholics are clamping down. Our main interest here is the Jehovah's Witnesses, but look at Catholic South America, where children as young as 9 are forced to deliver the baby of their rapist, or in Afghanistan, where 14-year-old girls are shot in the head for wanting to learn. Our favourite cult is clamping down by more apostate bashing, splitting more families, spreading more fear with warnings more dire and desperate, releasing brainwashing videos to children, and really testing their power. But we don't have to climb sacred mountains to find truth. We have information on our smartphones. But this increased suppression is consistent with the failing religion. A great analogy is watching the behaviour of a failing business. They cut perks, demand unpaid overtime, they make you fear for your income, force extra work, and the closer they are to disaster, the more they crack the whip. They're fighting for their lives, and this is precisely what's happening inside the cult. But all this has been a long-winded answer to the initial statement concerning the Jehovah's Witness continued growth. Frankly, any growth comes from countries where the people are so numb with fear they can't think straight. The moment things settle and they get internet, they'll leave. Numbers come from Jehovah's Witness born-ins, bullied into baptism. But if you look at the statistics released by the cult, those captured people aren't pulling their weight in field service, neither are they converting anyone, and at least 2/3 of those that join are barely active. Like in all things, the witness numbers are not honest and hide reality. This cult is dying, and we can speed that process by taking every opportunity to sue. The United Nations has declared it is a human right to have an unmolested family life. When this cult joined the UN, don't forget it still has ties, it agreed to the mission statement and aims of the United Nations, whilst dishonestly having a policy of destroying natural family life. The cult had no intention of upholding human rights. The United Nations should be informed of their anti-human activity. The cult should pay. But before I go, is it any wonder atheism is the fastest growing religious orientation? The Bible says at Joshua chapter 11 verse 6 that God's chosen should hamstring horses. At Numbers chapter 31 verses 35 to 40, Jehovah demands and gets 32 virgin girls. It doesn't say what for. Ironically, research shows atheists know the Bible better than believers, and that reading the Bible cover to cover leads directly to atheism. In other words, knowledge. And historically, isn't it the skeptical that has always been right? This is why this cult and others are fading, even as they play with reported numbers. P.S. I've asked before, but what does it mean to come to Christ, and which one? It really is a genuine question.